I'm going to reveal which injuries are currently getting the highest settlements. There's been a recent trend of larger verdicts for pain and suffering in personal injury cases. Because of this trend, I've stopped using many of the old, smaller pain and suffering estimates that I used to rely on. I'll also expose why one person can get a huge payout, yet someone else with the same injury can get little to nothing. We're going to start off with injuries that are usually worth the most. We'll then work our way down to injuries that generally lead to smaller settlements. We'll focus on the value of your pain and suffering. That's by far the hardest part of the case to calculate. Figuring out how much you're owed for your medical bills and lost wages is usually much easier than figuring out how much your pain and suffering is worth. When we calculate how much your case may be worth, we add your pain and suffering, medical bills, and lost wages up. This gets us to the full settlement value, but there's no guarantee that you'll get paid the full settlement value. This is because there are many factors that can destroy your case. The complete list of things that can make your case worthless is simply too long to list here. To keep it simple, just know that the three main case killers are the following. Number one, no one else is at fault or you're mainly at fault. Number two, the accident didn't cause your injury. Maybe you had the injury before the accident. And number three, the at-fault person or company doesn't have insurance or money to pay you. I'll give you a quick example of one of these case killers in action. The injuries that usually lead to the largest settlements are paralysis, a severe brain or burn injury, or blindness. They're worth the most because they have the biggest effect on your daily life. These can often result in settlements where $1 million or more of the settlement alone is for your pain and suffering. The full value of your pain and suffering can also be in the multiple millions and climb up to $25 million or maybe even more. But let's say that you have one of those horrible injuries, but you also have one of the factors that destroys your case. For example, let's say that you have a brain injury, but the person that caused your accident has no insurance or money to pay you. To keep it simple, let's assume that the full value of your pain and suffering is $5 million. The full value of your pain and suffering assumes that the at-fault person or company is 100% at fault and they caused your injury. If the at-fault person or company has no insurance or money to pay you, you might not see a dime. Your case is only as good as your ability to collect from the at-fault person or company. So even though the pain and suffering from your severe brain injury may be worth $5 million or more, you may not get a penny. But I'm assuming that the at-fault person or company has no coverage or money to pay you. Sadly, most drivers are uninsured or underinsured. I know it's not fair, but that's just the way our system works. Now, if a large company caused your accident and injury, then insurance doesn't matter much. For example, let's assume that a Walmart truck hits you or you slip and fall at Target. Since those are two huge companies, they'll have enough money to pay your claim. This is true no matter how big your claim is. But what happens if someone else is at fault, but you're partially also at fault? This often happens in slip or trip and fall cases, but can also happen in car accident cases too. In this instance, you're only able to recover in proportion to the careless person's percentage of fault. For example, let's assume someone else is 75% at fault and you're 25% at fault in causing your accident. In this instance, you only get compensated for 75% of the full value of your case. Therefore, your percentage of fault has a massive effect on your case value. I'll also reveal some examples of cases where I needed to settle the case for less than the full value because my client was also at fault. Now, the other injury, which really isn't an injury that tends to result in the largest settlements, is wrongful death. That's when someone else is careless and causes your family member's unfortunate death. The full value of your mental pain and suffering claim for wrongful death in a state like Florida can range from $1 million to many millions. The closer your relationship with your loved one who is killed, the higher the value of your pain and suffering. On the other hand, a more distant relationship usually results in a lower value for pain and suffering. When I reveal the full value of pain and suffering for each injury, I'll give a range. Like any range, it has a low end and a high end. The low end is when you heal well. The high end is when one of the following applies. You're left with a large disability, you have a long extended period of treatment, or you have lots of pain. Insurance companies look at how often you get medical treatment for your injury. They put lots of weight on this because going to your doctor is evidence that your injury is affecting your quality of life. Going to a doctor to complain of your pain is 10 times more important than you telling the insurance company that you're in pain. If you have more than one injury, you add up your pain and suffering values for each injury. This is why cases that are often worth the most are those where you have more than one injury. The next injury that is usually worth the most is a total reversed shoulder joint replacement. The full value of pain and suffering is around $500,000. The next injury that's worth the most involves the longest bone in your body. The femur is the bone that extends from your hip to your kneecap. It's also called the thigh bone, and it's really serious if you break it. You'll likely need surgery, and the full value of pain and suffering is between $400,000 and $500,000. That's if you have surgery on your broken femur. We've been seeing some large jury verdicts for this next injury on our list. Its pain and suffering value has increased massively in the last year or 2 years or so. In fact, a jury recently awarded almost $4 million in pain and suffering for this injury. A woman slipped and fell at Publix supermarket in Florida. However, her verdict for pain and suffering would have been similar if she was injured in a car or truck accident as well. Although verdicts for this injury can be over $1 million, the average pain and suffering value is much lower. For settlement, the full value of pain and suffering is between $300,000 and $500,000. So what's this injury? It's when you have one level of your back or neck fused. A fusion is a surgery where doctors connect two bones in your spine to make it more stable and reduce pain. However, if you have two or more levels in your spine fused, the pain and suffering award increases to between $400,000 and $600,000. One of the major battles in fusion cases is that the insurance company will likely argue that your spine was already worn out before the crash. In other words, they're going to say that you had your injury before the accident. If you sue, they'll hire a doctor who will likely testify to this. Next up is if you have surgery to fix a fracture of your tibial plateau. That's the top of the bone beneath your kneecap. That fracture with surgery has a pain and suffering value that's between $300,000 and $600,000. I recently settled a tibial plateau with surgery case for $1.2 million. I worked on this slip and fall case together with another law firm. We got this $1.2 million settlement because of the following. Our client's doctor said she had post-traumatic arthritis and she'd need a future knee replacement. Also, my client had a meniscus tear and surgery. Since she had more than one injury, we added the pain and suffering values of these injuries together. A meniscus tear with surgery has a full value of pain and suffering between $100,000 and $125,000. Without surgery, a meniscus tear has a full value of pain and suffering of $35,000 to $60,000. In another case, a tractor trailer cut off a motorcycle rider and they crashed. The rider broke his tibial plateau and finger. Doctors performed surgery on both. After a fight, the truck's insurance company paid us $445,000 to settle. But that same case is worth more today since pain and suffering values for these injuries have gone up. If you have a tibial plateau fracture that doesn't need surgery, I estimate the full value of pain and suffering to be between $100,000 and $150,000. This is because I think you'd have problems given the serious nature of this fracture. The next highest paying injury is a specific type of ankle injury. It's not just any ankle injury. It's when you have surgery to fix 3 broken bones in your ankle, which is called a trimalleolar fracture. The average full value pain and suffering range is from $300,000 to $500,000. I settled a trimalleolar fracture trip and fall case for $670,000. In a different case, a man driving a car hit a bike rider, Sam, in South Florida. Sam suffered a trimalleolar fracture. The driver's insurance company, Geico, offered us just $100,000. And in my opinion, Geico is an above average insurance company. Imagine how much money a below average insurance company would have offered us. We battled and eventually settled with Geico for $350,000. When Geico evaluated the case, they pretty much paid around $344,000 for pain and suffering. After lawyers' fees and costs and paying back my client's medical bills, Sam got over $227,000 in his pocket. But pain and suffering values have gone up since then, so that same case is worth more today. The injury that's next up in terms of value involves the knee. It's an ACL tear and surgery to fix it, which is a major surgery that has a long recovery time. The full value of pain and suffering is between $250,000 and $350,000. An ACL tear without surgery is worth much less. It has a full value of pain and suffering around $50,000 to $100,000. Next up are 2 body parts that have the same pain and suffering value range. To reveal one of them, Shirley tripped over a change in unmarked floor level and fell at a motel in South Florida. But the pain and suffering payout would have been similar if she had the same injury in a car or truck crash. Shirley broke her upper arm bone, which is called the humerus. The doctor drilled screws and a plate into her shoulder. Shirley hired me as her lawyer. The insurance company offered us just $20,000 to settle Shirley's personal injury claim. But that's what insurance companies often do. They offer you much less than your case is worth. Surgery to a humerus fracture has a similar value to surgery to a broken kneecap, which is the patella. The full value of pain and suffering for each is between $200,000 and $300,000. I'm assuming that the fracture to the humerus doesn't involve the joint. If it does, the full value of pain and suffering may be higher. After a battle with the motel's insurance company, we settled the case for $240,000. Since Shirley had Medicare and they paid most of her medical bills, the pain and suffering payout was about $232,000. If you have a broken kneecap but don't have surgery, the full value of pain and suffering is $50,000 to $75,000. To expose the value of a broken wrist, we'll quickly look at a couple of my cases. A driver T-boned another vehicle who ran a red light. The driver who wasn't at fault broke her wrist. She hired me as her lawyer. She also had a herniated disc. A surgeon then drilled a plate and screws into her wrist. After a tough fight, I settled her case for $200,000. That same case would likely be worth much more today. I say this because the full value of pain and suffering for a broken wrist with surgery is $200,000 or more. But let's quickly look at another broken wrist case. Fred was in a car accident in South Florida where he broke his wrist. He had other less serious injuries. The other driver was 100% at fault. Fred didn't get surgery. I pressured the other driver's insurance company to pay us the $100,000 bodily injury coverage limits fast. That's the insurance that pays for your medical bills, pain and suffering, and lost wages. Bodily injury liability coverage is also called BI coverage, and it pays for your medical bills, lost wages, and pain and suffering. The full value of pain and suffering for a broken wrist without surgery is between $100,000 and $125,000. If your doctor recommends surgery but you don't get it, the pain and suffering is closer to the upper end of that range. Many people injured in accidents don't get paid fair value for this next injury, and it's often because they don't go to the right doctor. Many primary care doctors don't properly diagnose these injuries. I'm talking about when you have a minor traumatic brain injury. The big thing that adds value to brain injury cases is if you have cognitive issues. Those are problems related to your thinking, processing, and comprehending and memory. If you have a minor traumatic brain injury, be sure to see a neurologist. That's the type of doctor who can properly treat and diagnose your brain injury. If you have a minor traumatic brain injury with some minor cognitive issues that last about a year, the full value of pain and suffering is likely $100,000 to $150,000. If the symptoms last around 2 years, the full value of pain and suffering can go up to around $150,000 to $200,000. If your minor traumatic brain injury is more serious, the full value of pain and suffering can go up to $250,000 to $500,000 or more. This next injury may be worth up to $200,000, but usually has a full value of pain and suffering of around $25,000 or more. I'm talking about a scar, but let me explain. Scars are usually worth the most if an attractive woman has a scar to her face or other body part that is visible even while wearing clothing. And not all scars are valued equally. A scar on a good-looking woman or girl's face may have a full pain and suffering value of $200,000 or more. A keloid is a type of scar that grows bigger and wider than the original injury, making a thick raised area on the skin. Keloids are generally worth much more than a scar that doesn't keloid. A keloid on an attractive woman's breast may have a full pain and suffering value of $200,000 to $300,000. A scar on a child may have a full value of between $50,000 and $75,000. But your typical scar on a man's knee, for example, may only have a full value of pain and suffering of $25,000 or more. If you see a mental health counselor like a psychologist for your scar, that increases the full value of your pain and suffering. This is because getting counseling for a scar shows that it's bothering you. Also, if you have surgery and it leaves a scar, you should mention both your surgery and the scar to the insurance company for the at-fault party. Do all that you can to get paid for both the surgery and the scar. Send the insurance company high quality photos of your scar. Now let's talk about a rotator cuff tear in your shoulder. If you have surgery on a rotator cuff tear, the full value of pain and suffering is around $150,000. If the surgery results in a frozen shoulder, the full value of pain and suffering can get up to $300,000. If you have a rotator cuff tear without surgery, but you get some medical treatment, that has a full value of around $40,000 to $60,000 in pain and suffering. Next up is a procedure where a doctor cuts or burns some of the tiny nerves in your spine to stop them from sending pain signals to your brain. It's called a rhizotomy, and it has a full pain and suffering value of between $75,000 and $100,000. Now let's look at the settlement value of herniated discs. A typical herniated disc has a full pain and suffering settlement value between $50,000 and $75,000. The value has gone up huge in past years. However, a herniated disc with injections over a course of 6 to 12 months can be worth $100,000 for its full value of pain and suffering. This could be an epidural steroid injection, facet joint injections, or another type of injections. Injections alone may be worth $50,000 to $100,000 in full value for pain and suffering. If you have a herniated disc with complications, the full value may be $100,000. A herniated disc on someone who is older may be worth $100,000 in pain and suffering. This is because older people are more likely to have complications. A herniated disc with 2 or 3 years of medical treatment can have a full value of pain and suffering of $100,000 or more. Now the bad news. Many people already have a herniated disc before their accident. This means that the insurance company will take a hard look at the actual crash or other impact in your case. They don't want to pay you for an injury that the accident didn't cause or make worse. If you were in a car accident and the car suffered little to no damage, expect a hard fight, especially when making a claim with Progressive, Allstate, State Farm, Geico, and many others. They'll argue that the force from a fender bender wasn't enough to cause or worsen your herniated disc. This next injury has a full value of pain and suffering between $50,000 and $75,000. It's if you break your lower leg bone, which could be your tibia or your fibula, or if you break your elbow and you don't need surgery. The full value of pain and suffering for most broken bones is between $50,000 and $75,000. But I'm not talking about a broken finger. To get the insurance company to value the broken bone between $50,000 and $75,000, you may need to sue. This next injury has a full value of pain and suffering of $50,000 or more. It's when you have a compression fracture to one of the vertebrae in your spine. The $50,000 or more value is for one single compression fracture without surgery. Injections to the fracture may be worth $50,000 to $100,000 in full value for pain and suffering. In one of my recent Florida car accident cases, my client had a compression fracture and injections. He had some other minor injuries too. At first, one of the liable insurance companies refused to offer 1 cent. They said my client's claim wasn't even worth $100,000. But I fought and ultimately settled for $135,000, and my client was thrilled. I estimate the insurance companies paid at least $80,000 for pain and suffering. Now let's talk about a broken ankle, which has a full value of pain and suffering of $25,000 to $50,000. If you're older, it may be worth towards the upper end of that range. This is because you're more likely to have complications. For the most part, your feet aren't worth a whole lot. A broken finger without surgery has a full value of pain and suffering of around $25,000. What about the most common injuries, which are whiplash or pain in your neck, your back, or any other body part? These injuries are usually worth the least. That full value of pain and suffering can range from just $1,000 or so to $20,000. The thing is, so many people don't get paid fair value for their case because they don't use a simple claim trick. I've used this easy tactic to get combined settlements of several $1,000,000 in injury cases. I reveal what this tactic is in the video that's on screen now and linked in the description below, so watch it now. And if you've been injured in Florida or on a cruise and you think someone else is at fault, click the link in the description below to see if I could be the lawyer for you.